and the Dome of the Rock. She also collaborated with the former architect of the Awqaf, Dr. Issam Awad, the deceased Issam Awad, and she is preparing their joint publication on the architecture of the Temple Mount. So many works and lots of knowledge that I'm sure that you find also in her many articles and her books and her upcoming books. So I would say to Beatrice, the floor is yours, but I say, Beatrice, the desktop is yours.
Can you see my screen? Hello, can anybody hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Okay, you can hear me. Can you see the screen?
Yeah, we can see the screen. We can see it.
Okay.
It's blank here. What's?
That's not now. Should not be. I can see it and I can see the participants.
Yes,
Same
yes.
problem.
Yes.
It's okay? Okay, yellow.
Yes.
All right. Okay, during the Crusader period in Jerusalem, a structure was added to the east side of the Aqsa Mosque. With the departure of the Crusaders and later, these rooms became functional work areas, including one room for the lead preparation for roof repairs, and by the latest in the 19th century, a kiln room for tile production. These came to be called the Najara vaults, also known as the Madrasa al-Farsiya. The kiln room remained functional for tile production until 1920 and storage until 1939, when the building was demolished. This paper examines the period of tile production in the vaults and surviving tiles from this atelier in the Islamic Museum on the Ḥaram al-Sharif, and the fate of less successful production not in the museum. Since it's been proposed that the original 16th century tiles were made in this atelier, this paper begins with a brief chronology of the Dome of the Rock tiles. For example, the supervised project supervisors and tile makers. The tiles were both made on site on the Ḥaram or imported from Damascus, Kütahya in Anatolia, Istanbul, or Europe. This paper further examines the tiles removal from the dome and their storage in various places in the sanctuary. The primary focus will be on the tiles stored in the Najara vaults and their removal when these Crusader period structures were demolished in 1939 as part of the major British restoration/renovation of the Aqsa Mosque. There are multiple major reports that provide the best data for both the production and the condition of the tiles of the dome. First is the Ottoman archival documents, including Başbakanlık Arşivi, or the Prime Ministerial Archives of the Turkish Republic in Istanbul, the Kadi Sigilat, or the Ottoman Archives in Jerusalem, and additional documents in the Aqsa Library beside the Islamic Museum, and in the museum itself, and in the Awqaf archives, including those of Mimar Ahmet Kemalettin from the 1920s Turkish Republican period. All are either in Ottoman Turkish or in Arabic. For the 20th century British period, 1917 to 1948, there are two significant studies of the building, that of Ernest Tatum Richmond, The Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem, a description of its structure and decoration, the report prepared in 1918, published in 1924. And the second is a report of nearly 200 pages of 1946 by H.S. Peter McGaw, Kubata Sata, The Dome of the Rock, an account of the building and its condition with recommendations for its conservation submitted to the Supreme Muslim Council. And this is the most significant study of the building and notably of its tiles. Unpublished at the moment, but I'm in the process of preparing it for publication. The last is the 4-volume condition and renovation report of the Egyptian team for the Jordanian government in Arabic, prepared between 1970 and 1972 by the Egyptian team, entitled The Restoration of the Dome of the Rock, which is also unpublished, but mostly translated by both Issam Awad and myself earlier in the decade. Okay, 16th through the 20th century tiles. Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent replaced the exterior mosaics installing tiles on the Dome of the Rock and the Dome of the Chain during a 10-year period between 1545 and 1561 and 62, documented in inscriptions on the dome drum and in the north portal inscription. The only 16th century survivals on the building still. The likelihood, based on stylistic evidence, is that the 16th century tiles were made by Persian tile makers, and in all there were about 45,000 tiles, with Magor providing the most solid supporting data. Part of the tile mosaic Quranic inscription just below the drum and the dated north portal and drum inscriptions, as well as a small number of tiles from the Quranic Yasin inscription atop the arcade that are in the Islamic Museum on the Ḥaram, are the only 16th century survivals, at least on site. The Yasin tiles were identified as original due to their manner of production, characterized by deep pockets created for the white glaze, which differs from the tiles of 1874 and 75, which replaced the original inscription. Thus, these tiles in two sections of the inscription can be safely dated to the 16th century. There were multiple repairs of the Dome of the Rock tiles in the 17th, 18th, and 19th and early 20th centuries. Though there were repairs to the dome in the late 16th and 17th, very little is yet known about these repairs. But for the 18th and 19th century, much more is known. For the 18th, for restorations between 1720 and 1760, documents assert that at least blue and white lotus tiles were made by local potters for both the Dome of the Rock and for the Armenian Cathedral of St. James. The tile mosaic inscription was restored, and both the drum and octagon facades were repaired with replacement tiles at this time. The 19th century was a period of major restoration of the tile revetment, including 1817 and 18 for Mahmud II, in 1853 for Sultan Abdul Majid, and between 1873 and 75 for Sultan Abdul Aziz. Tiles from 1817 and 18 survive both in situ, which I think you can see, and can you see my pointer? This is one of the surviving dated tiles, 1233, still in situ on the building. They survive also in the museum. The latter signed Muhammad Darwish, who was also the calligrapher of the major document in the Islamic Museum documenting this restoration. A signature on another tile, which is no longer in the collection, indicates that one artisan was from Damascus, al-Dimashqi. This tile is now somewhere in a Paris collection. Starting to talk about the wandering tiles of the Dome of the Rock. The restoration of 1873 to 1875 included replacing the tiles on the south and west facades, as well as the replacement of all tiles of the Yasin Quranic inscription on top of the octagon. These tiles were produced in Istanbul and documented by Clermont Ganneau, who was on site at the time. The fact that they were numbered on the reverse for easy organization on site confirms this thesis, and also assisted with my research project in reconstructing the remaining portions of the inscription. The inscription currently in situ is a complete replacement was completely replaced in the 1960s. And you can see the numbers on the back from this tile. Also at this time, gaps in the 16th century tile mosaic inscription under the drum were filled in with replacement tiles made on site. The tile mosaic remains intact on the buttress, while the square replacement tiles appear on the right. Over here, some of the square replacement tiles. They were also done in multiple periods. In 1898, there was a hasty patching of tiles, and in 1908, the band below the drum inscription was reset with a jumble of tiles from all periods. quote unquote, which were retrieved from storage areas on the Ḥaram or are European imports. These that you can see in the slide are from the south and southwest facades and are European tiles. Some of these European tiles removed from the top panel of the southwest facade, I think I can show you that here in the arch, were now made into a coffee table, which lives in the École Biblique, which gives us more of a sense of the wandering tiles of the Dome of the Rock. For the British military government in 1918, Richmond proposed a tile restoration to return, quote, to the original, unquote, pattern shown in one illustration from his 1924 book on the Dome of the Rock. His wish was fulfilled in the 1960s, removal of all the tiles. For the tile restoration, in 1918, Mark Sykes brought David or Tavit Ohanessian from Aleppo, who had produced in Kütahya the tiles for the Turkish bath at the Sykes residence of Sledmere, which you can see on the left, which is in York in the UK, as well as later producing tiles in his workshop in Jerusalem for the Rockefeller Museum. The one on the left is the Rockefeller. Did I miss a slide? Let me back up. Nope, I must have not included it. My apologies. At the same time that the British brought Ohanessian, the Supreme Muslim Council brought Kemalettin to supervise the restoration. His name is Ahmet Mimar Ahmet Kemalettin. He was the Ottoman revival architect brought by the Supreme Muslim Council. It was also at this time that an exhibit was created and put on display in the newly established museum in 1923. That display is still mostly in situ and based on the typology created by Richmond. All but the large panel from the 1874 inscription remains in place, and it was removed to be studied in 2008, 2009. In 1946, at the end of the mandate period, AHS Peter McGaw prepared a near 200-page condition report of the Dome of the Rock with a major revision of the tiles and their history. Significant for the tiles are the 4 appendices at the end, including a catalog of the tiles on the tiles and their proposed restoration. This report was intended to parallel Hamilton's report on the Aqsa Mosque, published in 1949 as the Structural History of the Aqsa Mosque, a record of the archaeological gleanings from the repairs of 1932 to 42. Our report remains unpublished, but is the project for my upcoming sabbatical. Unlike the Aqsa Mosque, which experienced a combined restoration and renovation between 1938 and 43 by an Egyptian team appointed by the Muslim Council, the proposed restoration was not completed at the time. Now on to the Najara vaults. In 1918, Richmond indicated that the 19th century tiles, including those of 1817 and 1873 to 75, were made in the Najara vaults, also known as the Madrasa al-Farsiya. These vaulted structures were added to the east during the Crusader period. And you can see them here, added to the east side. They came in 3 sections, and I'll show you a plan in a bit. Richmond found 2 kilns in the building in 1918. At the time of Ohanessian's visit in 1918 to the Ḥaram, he also saw the old furnaces or kilns, one of which you can see in the, it's labeled oven in the upper right-hand corner over here. There was a second one here, not labeled kiln. Ohanessian also made a detailed sketch of the kiln. In my most recent visit to the Temple Mount Sifting Project on the Mount of Olives, when it was up there, In 2017, I was shown a spacer from a kiln that was found in the sifting, and it is identical to those drawn by Ohanessian of the kiln in the back room of the Najara vaults. And I can show you those spacers here in his drawing. Oop. Something strange just happened. Okay. Ohanessian experimented making tiles in the vaults using the large kiln. All attempts were completely unsuccessful. Also, in December 1926, Kemal Tin indicated that the two ovens, the quote, two ovens behind the Aqsa are not sufficient, unquote, for a kashani or tile workshop for another Muslim Kutaya artisan brought at this time. And that's from a report of the technical committee. When the vaults were demolished in 1939, and I show you that in process in this image, the mostly whole tiles were moved to the museum. And according to C.N. Johns of the Mandate Antiquities Authority, the quote, debris accumulated on the floor was removed and buried in pits to the east of the esplanade, unquote, confirmed by Magaw, who was there at the time. One of these pits was re-excavated in the 1946 during the reconstruction of the east steps of the upper platform, and was found filled mostly, almost entirely with, quote, fragments, wasters, and chippings of the original tiles, but including also fragments, unquote. Johns also states, it seems, quote, it seems clear that layer A containing the tile fragments must represent a late 19th century dump, as indeed we were assured it was by a local contractor who came to visit us while we were at work there, unquote. In another document, Johns indicates that it has been used as a dumping place more than once, and that the tile debris in the top layer seems to derive from the works of 1874. All of this is from the Mandate archives in the Rockefeller. Some fragments went to the Palestine Archaeological Museum, and some selected for the Islamic Museum. Thus, there was an historic pattern of burying waste materials in pits all around the site, particularly to the east. Thus, one can expect to find tiles from earlier production of, say, 1817, 18, but mostly from the later 19th century, both those produced and stored in the Najara vaults and those from the later experiments of Ohanessian in 1919. Some of the wasters that were found in a pit made their way to the Islamic Museum, where they remain today. In fact, among many wasters found in the Temple Mount Sifting Project remains from the area in front of Solomon's Stables or the Marwani Musalla are wasters identical to those in the museum. These wasters were probably those buried in pits east of the Aqsa. So the comparative material for the tile chippings, fragments, and wasters found in the Sifting Project should probably be compared to those surviving in the museum. I show you one tile waster above left from the Islamic Museum and the one below right from the Sifting Project. Clearly they are identical in production and waster. I attribute these two and all of their type to the experiments of Ohanessian. And I think if we search for the tile fragments, we'll find the parallels in the museum to the ones that were probably buried in pits to the east of the Ḥaram. Thank you very much for listening, and that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Beatrice. You should all know this is a great addition to Beatrice's article, chapter in Ottoman Jerusalem, published in 2000, where she talks about the restorations at the Dome of the Rock. She talks about the tiles. So thank you so much for such an interesting lecture. Now